Everybody, welcome to this week's 1-hour virtual session of the Federation Farmer. During this platform, what we talk about is many different things, but the program of the hour is the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. I'm going to introduce my guest in just a second, but I would like to say that we are being recorded. I would also like to say that we are having farmers and other folks who are trying to get through the application process come on this call so that if they have any questions, they can ask them after Matt presents his presentation. I want to tee this up by saying, if you haven't heard already, that the original deadline for this program was October 31st. Last week, USDA extended that to January 13th, 2024, to give everybody time to get this thing done and filled out and to tell their story. So with that, let me introduce myself as Tandalyn Daniel. I'm the Director of Communications and Member Relations for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. We are a 56-year-old cooperative association of Black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives. We span 17 states, and we are also a cooperator with the USDA in the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. We're offering outreach, education, and technical assistance, and that is what you see happening today on this call. I have invited this week Matt Bowman from the Windsor Group, and let me tell you a little bit about Matt. Matt is a 5th-generation farmer from South Carolina. He is from the Low Country. He is a FAMU graduate. I think those are Rattlers. He's a FAMU graduate. He's a veteran and flew jets for the Navy. His last position in the Navy was the acting director of diversity for the Navy. He owns a farm and wineries in both South Carolina and Florida. He's been married for 27 years, whoop, whoop, to Dr. Crystal Bowman, who is a pharmacist and a musician at the AME Church. He is the father of 3 teens, Matthew, Maria, I hope I said that right, and yes, Margaret.
Sophia.
And I'm about to kick it over to Matt to tell us what he's doing about the Windsor Group, what he's doing, and then he's going to get into a quick top line presentation. Everybody should go on mute. If you have a question, put it in the chat or raise your hand if you just got to get that out. And let's go.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the work that you do for the Federation and for all of us. As you said, my name is Matthew Bowman, and today I'll be talking to you about the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. I am the regional manager, so I cover 10 states, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The states I cover include Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So with that, Discrimination Financial Assistance Program was born as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And really, even prior to that, it covers, since 1862, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's engagements with Americans in discrimination. It's not just about Black farmers, white farmers, Spanish farmers. It also includes women, LGBT, sexual orientation, religious, faith. All Americans are included in this Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. And at the end of the day, it's about anyone who's been discriminated prior to January 1st, 2021. The Windsor Group was selected via competitive bid process to be one of 3 contractors to administer this program. Well, why did they choose contractors? Why not use USDA? Well, Congress felt that it was appropriate for USDA to outsource it so that the alleged discrimination by USDA would not be also being evaluated by USDA. There was also concerns that farmers may not apply if they felt that there was retribution. So they put a firewall in place. And there's 3 contractors. There's the Windsor Group, which has everything east of the Mississippi. There's Analytics Acquisition, which handles everything west of the Mississippi. And then there's the Midtown Group. And the Midtown Group is what's called the National Administrator, and they oversee the entire program. They're the ones who receive the money, and they're the ones who are going to cut the checks to the farmers in early 2024. It will not be a grant. It will not be a loan. It will be a check that goes to farmers in 2024. Early 2024 means February or March for those of you who are looking at your watch and thinking, when will I get the money? These are some pictures. This is who I am. You can see I'm a farmer. I'm also a business person. And I have a picture with Mr. Cornelius Blanding, Ms. Zernona Clayton, and others who are leaders in the community. And so we pride ourselves in 3 T's, those 3 T's being trust, transparency, and technical competence. This picture embodies those ideas. The suit, of course, is technical competence. The picture with the community leaders deals with the issue of trust and the fact that we understand relationships matter. And then, of course, transparency, not always in a suit, not always in a hat. A lot of times I'm in Florida on my farm and we are baling hay or picking grapes. These are the regional hubs. As you can see, Region 1 is the East Coast in green. Region 2, again, is my region, and that covers everything east of the Mississippi. The program has purposes and objectives, but at the end of the day, it's to provide financial assistance to farmers, ranchers, and landowners. That is it. Give farmers, ranchers, and landowners a process where they can get up to $500,000 in financial assistance. When you look at the program from a distance, if you're on your computer at home, anywhere in the 17 states that the Federation has influence and works, there's a couple things that'll jump out. One, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there are many different sections. The Discrimination Financial Assistance Program is Section 22007. It is specifically designed for the allocation of $2.2 billion by any farmer who'd been discriminated against prior to January 2021. These are the third-party vendors that we already discussed. The vendors provide 2 things, outreach and technical assistance. Well, Matt, what is the difference? Outreach is just making sure that Americans are aware of this program, that they're aware of the ability to apply, and they're aware of the ability to get financial assistance. So you'll hear it on the radio, you'll see it on the internet. Some of those advertisements and marketing will come from the Windsor Group or Analytics Acquisition. But some of it also comes from law firms. If you've been on the internet, you've seen dozens of law firms who've spent millions of dollars in making sure that farmers, ranchers, and landowners are aware of this program. They do that so that those farmers and ranchers and landowners will apply via the lawyers instead of applying via the free complimentary opportunity that we provide to each and every one of you. So in addition to the lawyers marketing, in addition to the Windsor Group and analytics marketing, there are also community groups and private citizens who are marketing this information. I would encourage everyone to be aware of fraudsters and scammers. Whenever fraudsters and scammers hear $2 billion, they immediately look for targets. They look for people that they can take advantage of. Just know this, if you hear nothing else from me, that you can get world-class technical assistance from the Windsor Group, Analytics Acquisition, or from the experts that the Federation has brought on as technical assistants to help you complete this application. You, as members of the Federation, already have everything that you need to be successful. You can come to us, and I encourage you to, but even within the Federation, the technical assistance experts that you have on your team are fully qualified. Now, how do I know this? In the regional office in Gainesville, all the applications for Region 2 come to that office. I've actually looked at every single application that's been mailed in. And I can tell you that the ones that are prepared through the Federation are top of the stack in terms of quality, completeness, thoroughness. I've seen the ones that come from lawyers. They are hit or miss. Some are good, some are not so good. I've seen the ones that have been done by private citizens that have had no technical assistance. Those are not as good, quite frankly. You need technical assistance to complete this application. The application is 40 pages. The thing to keep in mind about those 40 pages is it's just 10 easy steps. And I keep saying this over and over again. It's 10 easy steps. Most of the information is you telling your story, providing some identification, social security number here, a driver's license there. But the rest of it is information that you already have. You don't have to go back and try to create a story. You just simply have to tell the story that you already know. And that's the beauty of this application process.
It was noise. You couldn't.
There are some deadlines that you need to know. The extension is great. God bless extensions, gives us more time. Farming season will be over. January 13th is the final date. Midnight on the East Coast, midnight on the West Coast. So you really have until 02:59 on the East Coast on January 14th to get this application in. But I don't encourage you to do that. I want to encourage everyone to fill and complete this application as soon as possible. That gives you the most time to turn it in, to think about it. If there's any other information that you need to add to it, you can then resubmit an entire application that has all the information that you need for your situation. The good news is that the only one that will be evaluated is the last one that you turn in. So if you turn in 2 applications, one in September, and then you think about it and you have more information and you turn in one in January, the one in January will be the only one that gets evaluated. The evaluation, no application will be evaluated prior to January 13th in terms of providing financial assistance. So you don't have to worry that if you don't turn yours in early, somebody else is going to get a head start on you. All the applications, the entire universe of applications will be evaluated for monetary purposes after January 13th. Well, you're going to go, well, Matt, I'm getting a letter. I got a letter that said I forgot to sign a document or my supporting documents did not arrive. Those type of letters are what's called errors and omissions letters. Those letters are going out, but even though those applications are being looked at, they're only being looked at for completeness. Did you include the minimums of what you needed on those applications in order for it to go forward? So they're not being evaluated for money. Again, that will not start until January 14th, 2024. All right, there's regional hubs and responsibilities. I'm not going to go over those because those are mostly my jobs, but essentially it's outreach, technical competence, communicating with the cooperators, communicating with the call centers, and then working with the other partners. Who is eligible? Any farmer who's been discriminated against prior to January 1st, 2021 is eligible for this program. You have to have been discriminated in lending, and it's very specific to lending, either from the Farm Service Agency or prior to the Farm Service Agency from FMHA, which was the predecessor to FSA and arguably RD, Rural Development. So if you experienced discrimination from the Farm Service Agency from 1996 to 2021, or FMHA from 1996 going back to 1946, you're eligible for this program. Your local offices have copies. Your local USDA offices have copies of the applications, but you can also get your application by calling the 1-800 number. And we'll put that in the slide, but the 1-800 number is 1-800-721-0970. Again, that number is 1-800-721-0970. It is on the website, and that website, www.22007apply.gov, has everything that you need for this program. It includes telephone numbers. It includes frequently asked questions. It includes lists of USDA offices. The website also has list of events that are in your local area where you can go to get more information. How do you apply? Again, you go to this website, you can download the application from that website. Well, Matt, this is about the only internet computer use that I do. What should I do? If you do not have internet computer, you can always call the 1-800 number. And again, that number is 1-800-721-0970. And we will mail you out a paper application, and you can do the paper application. In each of your states, we have offices. Those offices are manned by people 40 hours a week. They are not banker's hours. They're not 9 to 5. So if you need to set an appointment after work for you and your family, they are been directed to make sure that they have appointments after hours and also on the weekends. The application, the 40-page application, can be done in person at one of those sites. You can also get a paper application and mail it. There's 2 locations where you can mail the application to. One is in Bethesda, Maryland, and the other is in Gainesville, Florida. So the Bethesda, Maryland address is the 6710A Rockledge Drive, and then the Gainesville, Florida address is the 2153 Southeast Hawthorne Road. So those are the 2 places you can mail it. If you're working with the Federation, you can go to one of the Federation offices and you can turn your paper application in, and the Federation technical assistants will take your application and they will process it for you. It is designed for us to hold your hand and walk with you every single step of the way. My recommendation is that you go to either a Federation technical assistant or a Windsor technical assistant to have your paper application completed. The paper application will then be turned into an electronic application, and then the electronic application will be what gets graded by the national administrator. If there is 3 steps, a paper application, an electronic, turning that paper application into electronic, and then grading, 2 of the 3 steps you can handle by working directly with the Federation or working directly with Windsor. And I encourage you to do that. If you go to a lawyer, the lawyer can only do 1 or 2 of those 3 steps. And that's why I encourage all farmers, ranchers, and landowners to go to the Windsor Group or to the Federation. This slide here covers frauds and scams. Beware of frauds and scams. Everyone on here is an adult, so that is self-explanatory. This process is free. You don't have to pay, and we are here to help you. All right, so that's the overview. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I like to pass control over to my host, and if you can pull up the application process, and I'm going to run through that application really, really fast because I want everyone to see it.
Give me a second. And there's a question while I try and get that. Oh,
well,
Sade
I can do it. I can do it. It's no worries. But there's a question. I'll take the question. What was the question?
I just lost it. John answered one, but there was a question if somebody had applied for EQIP and was denied, does that constitute, let's say, loan denial?
Yeah.
And
so go ahead.
No, we have a legal team as well that we're working with. So a lot of times these questions we pick up later, but Matt, if you have any insight to that, please share. If not, we'll have to answer that at a later time.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through this application really quick, and I'm going to answer that question in this application process. So how many minutes do we have? What am I at now? 18 minutes?
Yeah, you're at 12:18.
Okay. And can everyone see this supporting this application?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the screen, right? This is the last application. The only thing that's changed on this application is the date is now January 13th, 2024 instead of October 31st, 2023. But what I really want to focus on is right here. When you're doing this application, there's 2 words, the most important 2 words in the whole English language: must, right there, and may. When you're doing this application, anywhere where it says must, you must provide the information that's requested. Before you start scratching your heads, the only thing that must be provided in this application is your identifiable information and a copy of your Social Security number. You don't even have to have your Social Security card. Those are the only things that you must do. Everything else you may do. Now, if you just do the bare minimum of what you must do and provide your information, your identifiable information, more than likely you'll get this much money because you haven't told a story. You'll get no money. No financial assistance will be provided to you. But those are the only two things that you must do. Everything else is may. All right, so let's go through the 10 steps. Step 1 is about you. So all you have to do in this section, what's asked of you, is provide your name, your address, and how we can contact you. When you're doing this section here, this step here, just note that it asks you your first name, your last name first. So you have to put your last name. So in this case, it would be Daniels and then Tandalin. For the mailing address, do not put a P.O. box for the mailing address. Put a physical address, put a location where you can receive a check. When the financial assistance is being dispersed, it's going to go to this address right here on step 1. If you have a farm that you lease, if you have an address that you use periodically, do not have your check go to that address. Make sure that your check goes to that address where you most check your mail and you're most likely to get the information to receive your check. The best telephone number. If we have any questions as we're taking your paper application and typing it into electronics, the fastest way to reach you is through phone call. So please provide the phone number and then the backup phone number in this step 1. The email address, use the email address that you check the most often. If you do not have an email address, use the email address of a relative that you trust. Everything that is done via letter mail will also be sent via email. And so that doubles your chances to make sure that you don't miss any communications between your household and our office. They're going to ask you to...
You said not to use a P.O. box, but if that's where people get their mail, including checks, shouldn't they put that address?
If you use a P.O. box for your normal way of business, and that is the only way that you have to receive a check, you can then use a P.O. box. But it is not the preferred method. But if that is how you normally receive mail, you can use a P.O. box. And we understand that many farmers and ranchers use a P.O. box. For our farm, we used a P.O. box for many, many years and still do, quite frankly, in South Carolina. We use a P.O. box, and that's how we receive mail. So excellent point. Okay. The next section is your Social Security number, or if you're an entity, your tax identification number. A thing to note is that the checks, when they're mailed, will be mailed to persons, not to businesses. So if you have an entity, and we'll get in this later, you have to carve out what percentage of the entity you own, and then the check will be sent to you in proportion to the percentage of the business that you own. So that Social Security number will be very, very important. All right. These are the types of documents that you must have in order that are acceptable for this application process. And as you can see, there's over 14 different types of documentation that can be used for you to prove to the national administrator that you are who you say you are. You will need 2 pieces of identification to do that: military ID, passport, driver's license, etc. You also must provide proof of your Social Security number or your EIN. In this case, you can use your actual Social Security card. You can use a W-2 that has your full social on it. You can use a pay stub. And if you can also use a 1099 form or a 1098 form, which would be your mortgage or your payments as a contractor, if you have that.
So if you answer the first part and you use your driver's license and your Social Security card, do you have to provide a scan of the Social Security card again for Social Security answer?
Correct. If you use the driver's license, let's go back up here. So if you use your driver's license and your Social Security card issued by the Social Security Administrator as your two forms of identification there in the first part of the process, when you get down to the second and they ask for you to provide proof of your Social Security number or your EIN, I would ask that you submit another copy of the exact same Social Security card that you put above. When you're going through this application, the easiest way to think of it is to just use plain standard written English and assume that there is a checklist and a person is just going right down the checklist, aligning a section to an action, a section to an action. So you're going to get asked throughout this application for the same piece of information, perhaps multiple times. Just restate the information again for clarity, and that will give you the strongest chance to get financial assistance. Now, one could argue, well, I've already turned in that piece of information in step one, the top part. Why should I have to rescan the same Social Security card for the next step? Well, there may be two people who are actually going through this at separate times. So whenever they ask you to do something, my suggestion, my recommendation is that you, if it's easy to do, that you just go ahead and do it. And we understand there'll be redundancy in doing it that way. Information about alternative contacts. In the event that we can't reach you, we need to be able to reach someone that you trust, that we can talk, either A, to reach you, or B, to talk about your application. And this first part here, it talks about alternative contacts that we can reach if we need to reach you. That's the first part. Then below that, there's a section for alternative contacts that we can talk about the application. Now, that could be a business partner. It could be a spouse. It can be someone, a lawyer. It has to be someone who you have authorized to speak on your behalf. And has all of their information there. The last part is information about anyone who helps you prepare this form. In this section, if someone else helped you prepare this form, because this is a financial document, it's very important that you put the names of anyone who helped you complete this form. And you'll put that in two sections. You'll put it here, and then at the end in step 10, you'll also retype those persons' names and contact information. All right, so you're 1/10 of the way through, and that took us 6 minutes. So now you go to step 2. Step 2 will talk about the type of applicant that you are. Are you the self-borrower? Did you borrow it with the money with attempt to borrow the money with a spouse, or did you borrow the money as a business? The last step would be if you assume the debt of someone that you borrowed the money for. So this speaks to the loans. Now, there's also a section in here that many people will fall into. And those are the people who went to get technical assistance from an office, and they never even got to the part where you can get a loan, much less apply for a loan. They didn't even get to the technical assistance that even told them about the loans that are available. So that is also covered in this application. So you would mark the box that says you're a would-be borrower. And if you're a would-be borrower, you would not complete the rest of step 2. You'd immediately go to step 3. So those of you who did not receive the help that you were seeking, you are in the category of a would-be borrower. So there's borrowers and there's would-be borrowers. And this application covers both of those. The step 2 about the type of application and about the loan is based on your experience. You go through here, you fill out the information about the number of borrowers and co-borrowers. You put all of their contact information. and it's very straightforward. This is information that you actually have about your wife or your business partners. Same thing about the entities. Now, there's some of you who will use multiple entities throughout the course of your farming history. In that case, you need to describe all of the entities. Perhaps when you just started farming, you were in a partnership with your father or your family members. Then later on, you became in a partnership with business partners who were not family members. And at the end, you became a partnered in an entity with your spouse and your children. In this step here, you need to describe all of those entities that experience discrimination. If an entity did not experience discrimination, it is not necessary that you describe it. This step, if you have entities, is where I encourage you to reach out for technical assistance from either the Windsor Group or the Federation technical assistant advisors, because it can get very complicated. Now, if it's just you and a spouse doing business together in a state like Florida, where Department of State registration is not required, then that makes this section far more straightforward. Down here, it talks about the different types of entities. I want to zero in on this section right here. Percentage of interest in the entity when the discrimination occurred. That's going to be very important for financial payments. You will be paid back in the percentage of which you own the entity. So let's say for 1 year, you own 10% of an entity that was discriminated against. A couple years later, you owned 90% of another entity that was discriminated against. When the money is set aside for each of the years that the discrimination occurred, you'll be paid in proportion to your percentage of ownership. All right. Let's see here. See how this thing jumped all the way to the bottom? But I've done this so many times that I know exactly where I was at. So now we're going to go to step 3. So step 1, we talked about you. Step 2, we talked about your loan. Step 3, we're going to talk about your eligibility as a farmer. And all of these is just telling your story. So you're going to tell your story as a farmer. The hardest part about this step 3 is getting your FSA farm number or your Farm Service Agency farm number or your Farm Service Agency track number. This information does reside with your local Farm Service Agency. If you don't have your farm number, you can send an email to the USDA and they will provide you the information that you need. Or you can also go to your local USDA service center and get your FSA farm number and your farm track numbers. Now, if you've had multiple farms, some you've leased, some you've owned, some you've sold, it gets more complicated. And many times the records may not go back as far as you need them to go. If the records do not exist, get a statement from your USDA Farm Service Agency office stating to that fact so you can include it in your application process. But step 3, that is the biggest. Let me go back up here to that page. Yeah, that's the biggest question that you need to do there. And entanglement, I don't know why this computer keeps jumping down to the bottom, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep going back. Step 4. This talks about your eligibility for this as a borrower or an attempted borrower. There's 2 types of loans. There's guaranteed loans, and then there's direct loans. If you got a direct loan or attempted to get a direct loan from USDA, you'll do step 4. If USDA referred you to a bank or financial institution and then guaranteed the loan, then that would apply to you. Of note, though, if the discrimination happened through a third-party bank, not associated as a direct loan, not associated as a guaranteed loan, then you would not be eligible for this program. USDA had to have an actual physical interaction with you and discriminated against you in the loan process for you to be eligible. All right. I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to spend most of my time on the 2 most important steps. They're all important, but the two most important steps in this process. And that is step 5, which is going to describe the type of discrimination that occurred, and step 6 that talked about your financial losses. In step 4 here, before we go to step 5, it's going to talk about the loans in step 4. And you see here the farm ownership loans, the farm storage loans, the emergency loans. There are some programs that are ran and managed by USDA that do not qualify. Not every FSA program qualifies for 22007 money. If you're in EQIP, if you're in hurricane relief, I encourage you to go to a technical assistant office and get your questions answered. If you are in irrigation and you're really looking for discrimination from the NRCS, then that also would not qualify. But those type of questions are best answered by going to a technical assistant that represents the Federation or from the Windsor Group. The loans that do qualify here are on step 2, step 4, question number 2, and that's the farm ownership loan, and that's those 13 loans that you see listed, including the micro loans, the emergency loans, etc. Let's go to step 5. Step 5 talks about the discrimination that you experienced. Having done many of these applications, step 5 is where we spend the bulk of our time. There's a couple of best practices to help you complete step 5. Discrimination in the USDA Farm Loan Program. The first thing that you should do is get a physical copy of the application, but even before you come into the office and talk to one of the technical assistants, is take a look at the application yourself. And then when you take a look at the application, you'll go through all the steps that we just talked about, steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to get to step 5, and you're going to think about, how were you discriminated against? Was it a direct action, someone calling you out of your name? Was it a policy issue where they gave you your money, late? That was a form of discrimination. They gave you a higher interest rate, so the terms were different than other farmers in your area. That's discrimination. Did they not tell you about programs that you qualify for? That's discrimination as well. What's going to happen is sometimes it's a mix of all of the above. When that happens, you have to describe the discrimination in a way that tells your story compellingly. And there are 2 ways to do it. At least 2. There's probably more than that, but 2 ways to do it. One is by year. Start in the year that the discrimination occurred. Let's say 1982. And as you write your narrative, you can describe everything that happened to you in 1982. You might have been called out of your name. You might have been discriminated against because you were married or because you weren't married. You might have been discriminated against because of the color of your skin, even if you were the same color as the same race as the person who worked at U.S. Department of Agriculture. You may have been discriminated against because of your sexual orientation. And you write that in the year that it occurred. Now, the next year, your situation may have changed. So you experience discrimination differently. So when you write about the discrimination chronologically, year by year, is one way to do it. The other way to do it is by function. And you say, okay, I've been discriminated against because I was Black, and this is how it happened. And you tell your narrative, and you put the instances, I'll go down here, of when it happened. For step 5, you need to take your time and write each and every instance of discrimination that you experienced. There are pages that you can copy and include. So you're not limited to the pages here in step 5. You can actually make copies of those 4 pages, pages 23 to 27, and keep including them as they show the different instances of discrimination that you experienced. If you've experienced more than one instance of discrimination, I encourage you to go in to a Federation office or go into a Windsor office and get the technical support that you need. It gets complicated once you experience more than 3 different instances of discrimination, and the paper gets voluminous. There's lots of paper. And so I encourage you, if you experience more than 3 instances of discrimination, to go and get technical assistance in person from either the Federation Technical Assistant Advisors or the Windsor Technical Assistance Advisors. The way that you will know that you're doing step 5 correctly is because for each of the instances of discrimination, you'll have those 4 pages. All right, it's now 12:40. Let's go to step 6. And step 6 talks about the economic losses. Yesterday in one of the cities, I was talking with a farmer, and he had many instances of discrimination. A far more difficult thing to add up was what was the financial losses, because what they did was they ended up self-financing after they had those discrimination. So in that case, they just went ahead and used their own money. So how did we calculate their discrimination? How do we calculate their losses from discrimination? Well, what we did is we took a look at the interest rate from the bank where they got their ultimate loan, from the commercial bank. It was 5 percentage points higher than the interest rate that they would have gotten had they received the loan, the direct loan, in this case from USDA. So we used that difference in the interest rate, we added it over the years, and we came up with a number. Through that process, they also ended up losing a home. Their estimated value for the home was somewhere around $45,000. But what I did was I went to Zillow and I pulled up the address of that home and got today's value, the 2023 value of that home. And it's $199,000 for that home that they lost. So in step 6, the big takeaways are, number 1, use 2023 dollars when you're talking about your losses. Come and get technical assistance from Windsor Group or the Federation, and they can help you calculate accurately the amount of losses that you actually experience, especially when it comes to interest rate calculations and also land and house values. Land and home values are 2 areas where I encourage you to get technical assistance if you experience those. All right, step 7. The rest of step 6 is self-explanatory. Step 7 is if you are a Pigford claimant, if you are a Hip-Segal, Love, Garcia, Hispanic women's, if you're in any of those legal issues, you then go to step 7. And this application process covers all of those issues from prior claims. Step 7 is called prior claims, complaints, and appeals. And that is for my Pigford farmers. If many of you are Pigford farmers or your relatives are Pigford farmers, make sure you complete step 7. In there, they're going to ask how much money you received. If you're a Track A farmer, you may have received the $50,000. If you're a Track B Pigford farmer, you may have received more or less, depending on what the adjudication went through. If you do not have your Pigford records, the USDA does have a record of a file of all of the Pigford recipients. So they know them by name and by the amount of award. They don't have the actual documentation, though, that was provided to the attorneys. In that case, I encourage you to reach out to the head of the class action lawsuit, the law firm that represented you for the Pigford, and ask for a copy of your file and a copy of your record so that you can have both of those documents, and then you can submit them to this program. If the attorney is still in the civil rights space, their office may ask you to have them complete this discrimination financial assistance application for you. That is a decision that you have to make, although I'm encouraging you to first go and get this application done on your own at no cost by either Windsor or by the Federation. And if later on you decide to use a law firm, then it's totally up to you. I don't think that anyone should spend 25% or higher, or even 10% to have this application done. The technical assistance is there and available. All right, I have 1 minute left. I'm going to go to step 8. Step 8 is the step where you can put any additional information that's not covered. There will be some of you who don't fall neatly into a category. In that case, provide your identification, 2 pieces of identification, your social security number, and then the information in step 8 where you think that you qualify for this financial assistance. Step 9 is your IRS information, your taxpayer information. If you're a citizen, it applies. If you're a green card holder, it also applies. And then step 10 is a signature step where you sign that everything you certify is true and complete to the best of your knowledge, best of your memory, and then you put the name of anyone else who helped you complete this application so that they are also responsible and can be identified. We are now at 12:45, so we have 15 minutes left for question and answer. John, I know you got some. I'm sure you're in the chat. I love working with you. And Chandlin, back over to you.
All right, let me come off mute. Am I off mute? All right, so if anybody has questions, I know that we've been answering questions along the way. Okay. All right, let's see if there's a new question in the chat or if you raise your hand. Give me a second. What is the number of past offices to get your Pickford files from? Shirley, could you come off mute and kind of clarify that again?
Yes, thank you. Hello to everyone. I didn't make that too clear.
Hello.
I just wonder, is there a number available to the past offices or attorneys where you can get your claim file, Pickford, Chief Siegel, etc.? I'm sorry I didn't make that clear.
So there are. I know that there are some attorneys who are still in practice who may have access to the Pickford files. Attorney Greg Francis out of Florida was one of them, and his information is online. And so if you Google Greg Francis, he may have information for your file if he represented you. But I know he represented hundreds of Pickford farmers around the country. So that's one.
Yeah, just was a question in general because some individuals have asked that. Just a question in general.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that, I definitely talked with Greg Francis at the beginning of this process. So surely I can definitely put you directly in contact, but all of the questions that are being asked here, I'm compiling so that we can answer them in a consistent way as follow-up to the meeting attendees.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any more questions? And again, I know that we have a lot of Federation staff on the call, which we have so many trainings. Don't want to stop the flow of any of that. However, if you are a Black farmer in the community and you have a question to ask, every question is important. Please ask that question now. One of the questions which I answered was, I was discriminated against in 1984. Am I eligible? Yes, you are. All right.
Absolutely.
John has his hand up.
John Zippert. Hey, my question to you, Mr. Bowman, is you are doing these applications. Windsor Group is doing these applications in various places. How long is it taking you to do? What is your average time spent with an applicant?
Yeah. So the average time spent with an applicant is 2.5 hours of actual work on the application. Now, the actual time spent with an applicant is 4 hours. And the reason why that happens is many of the applicants who are coming in are unfamiliar with the paper application. initially, we have a screening form that provides anyone who comes to our office with information so that they can come in fully prepared. In reality, people work, people are busy. Sometimes the first time they see that application is when they sit in front of one of my technical assistant advisors. So we spend the first 30 minutes building rapport and establishing trust. Then we get around to the application. Frequently, they have not brought any paperwork with them. That is the reality. They're literally going through this the first time. So we go through step one, we get to step two. They typically have step two, they have their identification. But as we go into steps 3 and 4, it becomes obvious that they don't have enough information with them. And so what we do is we muddle through. We just work for 2.5 hours straight, and then we send them back to get the rest of the information that they need. Most often we set up another appointment so that 2.5 hours then gets extended because there's a follow-on appointment or they're mailing us supporting documents. And then we go back and forth. Did you receive the supporting document? Not yet. So you can expect between 2.5 hours and 10 hours of back and forth contact with these offices to get these applications completely done. And when I say completely done in a way that a reasonable person could make a decision that financial assistance is needed.
So
we are averaging 2 visits in 5 hours in Alabama at ASAC, averaging. Some take more, some very few take less. So I would say we are spending 5 hours with people on 2 occasions, and the exact same thing that you have encountered, we have encountered, that the first time we meet with people, they really have not studied or understood this process, and they have to go back and get documents. But I know you have other questions, so I won't monopolize the question, but I have others if you
okay, so John, let's take some other questions, then we can come back to you. And then I will also say to the people at the Federation that we can even set up another, because we are providing technical assistance, the Windsor Group Analytic Acquisitions. Those 2 groups are here that we're supposed to be helping each other and working together. And now I'm going to take 2 questions from farmers. One, if the farmer who applied for the loan has passed away, can surviving family members file on their behalf?
So surviving family members can only file on their behalf if they've assumed the debt. Now, part of the question that is alluded to, but not specifically asked, deals with spouses. Children are very straightforward. If you assume the debt, then you qualify. If you did not assume the debt, then you do not qualify as a child of a farmer who requested a loan, because you're an heir in that sense. A more difficult question is the spouse. If the spouse is a partner in that farm, then an application could be made by the spouse. If you're in a community property state, there's some state laws and there's some state rules. So if you're a spouse, I would encourage you to go to get technical assistance from either the Federation team or for Windsor team to see if you qualify or not. And I've posed this exact same question to USDA. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there were some years prior to the 1980s, especially if you're 1960s, 1970s, women weren't on applications. Women were not on applications. You might be the person who is the business partner. You did the work. You even filled out the application. But women did not go into those offices and sign for anything. in certain states and in certain communities. So I think that if you're a spouse, it warrants another discussion. So John, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Question has been raised over and over, and especially by Fire Rose Touré Sanders. And my advice to people is that they should apply as a would-be co-borrower.
That's right.
And try and let whoever is going to make the final decisions on this make the decision, because the spouse was directly involved in many ways in the farm operation. And in some cases, they went to all of the meetings with USDA, or many of the meetings with USDA, and participated and were directly humiliated, discriminated against, felt smaller than they should have felt, and all the rest of it. So I say try as a would-be co-borrower and explain the situation in all, explain when you get to, there are parts in here where you can explain what your role was and to explain it. And I think ultimately whoever makes the decisions is going to have to make some decisions on this. That's my take on it.
And I would like to chime in here because I'm helping run the Federation's line, and we're doing intake forms. And it seems that a lot of people are talking themselves out of applying. Well, it doesn't really apply to me. You don't know. You don't know until you start digging through the information. But in every case, if you actually never even attempted to get a loan, then you would be right. But one lady is like, well, it was 1973 and I can't find my records. So then we helped her go to the USDA and request those. So with that, I'm going to ask yet another question. Can you review a completed application to verify completion and clarity? Specifically, Aaron, I think that you're asking if you've already completed your application and you take it into a Federation office just to be reviewed. Now, I'm going to give you a very policy-heavy answer, okay? We have, the Federation is operating in 7, and we have 3 minutes, and we are going to end this call. We may even have Mr. Matt Bowman back. But for the Federation to sign off on that final page as somebody who has helped you complete your application, we would like to be there during many of those steps. So you go through the intake, you sit through an info session. What we're not discouraging outright is just somebody coming and dropping it off. But the reality is, if we're already spending 4 to 5 hours on an application, what we want is for you to come in and sit down and have an actual technical assistance interview and go through that process. Because it is in that process that we learn where the gaps are. And we are a staff, we've got about 4 people in every state, and we operate in 7 states. That would be Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas. I think I got all 7. And so, yes, I would definitely try it. But if somebody's sitting with somebody right then and there and they're going through the pages with them, that person initially, and that is why we have all fought very hard. I think John is a big proponent to get an extension because all types of situations are cropping up. But in order for the Federation to sign on the last page that they helped you, we really have to help you. Now we've got many more questions.
For the Windsor Group, what we do is there's errors, there's omissions, and there's deficiencies.
Okay.
My staff will only do errors and omissions. We will not go through an application and tell you that you're weak in this area or strong in this area. So we don't do deficiencies. We just do errors and omissions.